And so I gotta start that. Okay. So why are you over there and not over here? Hmm. Hmm. Once again, modern technology. All right, we're gonna get moving. Sharpen a couple things so we can get rolling. Should have checked that. Doesn't appear that it's on 60 degrees. It is not. All right, Mr. Button. One down. Spin those first. Now we can go do a little work. All right. Squeaky, squeaky. Always verify. Yes, I could have taken them off on the bandsaw. Almost just as easy to take them off square. And I just have to deal with little chips rather than a bunch of little chunks of wood. It would help if I bring the camera back over here. I just thought of that. Wouldn't do you much good to watch the grinder sitting there still as a bone. There we can come in a bit. I'll tell you what, let's go here. Make more sense. Okay, so it's not quite round. Not really, not really worried that it is or isn't. How we are making more of these honey dipper jar things. That's a little closer to round. Put a tenon on it. This is actually what this facing the tailstock is the top. You just need a simple way of grabbing a hold of it. Most of the work on these gets done from below. Clean it up a little bit with a parting tool, and we're good to go. And I have two of them ready to go. Actually, I have three. There's a third one laying here. Done the same thing with them. Just while I'm on this side, I might as well just put a bit of a tenon on. It's about 1/8 of an inch deep, something like that. Doesn't need to be very deep. This is probably actually one of the, I shouldn't say the top sellers, but these do sell very well for me. They're fairly quick to make. So quick to make is always good. Simple. As long as you follow the correct steps. I have one over there laying on the workbench that I kind of didn't quite follow the correct steps. As in, I forgot to drill a hole for the honey dipper part. And I actually have it completely finished. So now I have to try and figure out how I'm even going to remotely try. The tenon's quite big. That'll be the next issue of not taking the 2 seconds that it would have taken to measure that. Because I only have a small space in there, so I was just guessing. And as you can see, very quick and easily, like we guessed especially on this one, we guessed way out of whack. So try and take a shortcut and act like you know what you're doing, and you can see it's considerably wrong. Nothing like starting out the day doing your work twice. Compare, let's look at the walnut one. I think the walnut one maybe we can get away with. Yes. Eyeball was a little better on that one, so we can get away with that one. The other one, not so much. So we kind of need to start on the bottom of these. At least that's where I start them. Makes the most sense, at least to me. It's got a little bit more wobbling than what it should. So, thinking my half-assed tenon. Is really half-assed enough that it's not seating down in there. Oh, doesn't always pay to try and take little itty-bitty shortcuts. Doesn't have enough room. You can't see it, but the jaws are grabbing it the whole way out here because there's not enough, I didn't clear out enough space in there. So we'll take a little bit more off the tenon and fade a bit more out. I always try and tell the people that are in my classes, just there. I mean, it's a pain in the ass to have to go back and do that because I was trying to act like I knew what I was doing and trying to cheat or trying to save a tiny little step. Didn't pay, but there was more than enough material to actually go back and redo it. So now you can go straight up to there, and that should work, I think. And that needs to be that way, this way. What do you mean I need no? So that's right. Alright. Now we're back to where we should be, I think. Tool rest isn't. We'll flatten it out. You got a really sharp edge right there. And these calipers, let's not make the same mistake twice or 3 times. I'll just get the lid and make sure. I think I had these set for the other day, and I do. They're a little smaller than what I need, so smaller is better. So we'll mark where we need to remove. How are we doing tonight, Todd? Get rid of some material with the bowl gouge first. A little less work to do with the scraper. Tool rest comes up fairly high at this point because I'm gonna clean up my area out here. The tool rest for a traditional scraper in this mode has to be up fairly high, higher than what it needs to be the rest of the way in, or the rest of the bottom, I should say. So if I don't, this is fairly thick, so the bottom would hit. Oh, we're doing all right. Full of mistakes already tonight, but that's okay. Full of creating more work is what it was, but we got through it. We managed to get it fixed easily enough. So it's a little bit too tight. Tiny little bit of space we're going to remove. I'm just kind of using the bed waste for my straightness in there. So we still need to go in deeper, a solid 1/8 of an inch or more. So where the tool rest is at, I'm going to try and see if I can get. I won't be able to get to the middle. I know that. That'll be too much of an angle, so I better bring it down a bit. But as soon as I do that and try and go out to this outside edge, it probably doesn't show on the camera, but there's a little lip right there because the bottom of the scraper will hit the sidewall. Probably pretty close to being deep enough, I think. You do need a little bit more of a recess for that little rounded over rim. I'm going to go clean up this space while we're here. I could have, should have. If I need to get into that corner in there, I can do that with just a skew without moving the tool rest up because it's thin enough. This is one that's probably going to make me cough. As we drop the lid on the floor. We're still not quite. Need to go down just a bit more in the bottom. And hopefully we're relatively straight across. Not that it totally matters because they get glued in, but I don't really want it to rock. That'll work. Recess could have been a little bit smaller out here at this rim, but I'd rather it not be too small because when this thing decides it's going to move, and we all know that it will, then we won't have the issue of it wanting to pop that lid back out. So that we don't mess up again, I'm going to drill a doggone hole. I said earlier, Todd, you weren't here. I made one of these the other day, or made the top, and lo and behold, I was just cruising right along, did all this, and finished the inside, the whole 9 yards. The outside's done, finished up, ready to give it a buff, and I looked and I'm like, well, holy shit. You didn't drill the hole down the middle of it to accept the honey dipper part, which haven't really looked at it, but I don't know that I have any real recourse to go back because I need to, first order of business, I need to mark the lid. The lid, you can't drill the lid on here because as soon as it bites into it, it will just spin. So I just mark the center point with the point of the drill bit. That's all I do with it. I will drill these on the drill press. These are actually very hard to drill and drill a nice clean hole. At least so far, I haven't come up with a magic solution for that. But it doesn't really matter that it's not a clean, super clean hole. It just needs to be big enough so that the honey dipper part goes up through it. So a little deeper than the drill bit is. That's good enough. It's probably close to a 1/2 inch, I would think. Maybe not. Maybe more like probably a little less than a 1/2 inch. Should be more than enough to hold the honey dipper part up in there. So that should be good. So we'll give the outside, at least the lower part, a little bit of a shape. Which point will go back over there. Got lots of material there, so I did it because I chipped the piece out there, but that's okay. No, not the end of the world. Piece of walnut. I wasn't being very nice, and it certainly is not cutting very nice. So hopefully that doesn't continue. So let's shrink this down a bit. I just want to give them a little curve, a little place, simple place to get a hold of. And then we'll bring the top of the lid down underneath that. Hopefully a nice fair curve. Could do that with a spindle gouge, probably easier than I could the bowl gouge, but the bowl gouge is already in the handle, so that's what we used. long as it cut it cleanly, which it did. Also left me very much of a razor blade out here. And just bring that razor blade in a bit. Something like that. Okay. So that, just thinking out loud a little bit. Want to make sure yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I don't quite, I'm not the one to try and figure out why people buy what they buy, but um, I certainly have sold my fair share of these. Now, these are the honey dipper jar, so it will get a honey dipper in, but I think that was, I want to say Ron Brown's best. He used to make just the lid for on a mason type jar or something like that. And he said the same thing, that he said they sell really well, and it's a very small piece of material, and they don't take very long. But you don't want to forget this little step, a little itty bitty step to sand this face and that face before you move on. Because there's like one time and kind of one time only deal to be able to reach in here and get this, at least without smacking your fingers on the chuck. So we'll sand just that little area pretty much complete, even though I may probably do some more up there. So that's why I don't go very far up. I just want this really just the bottom half an inch. I'll stop and take a look. I'm seeing a white line coming around. Go in reverse. There's walnut. It likes to pick up a little bit of grain or something there. So we'll go this, since it's spinning in this fashion, I do go to 600 with it, just so that the scratch marks are very, very small. Sanding scratch marks, put it that way. If you wanted to, you could sand in both directions. Never a bad idea on something like this. Maybe not with every grit, but at least a final kind of grit. So one last check. It did fit, so no reason it wouldn't still fit. I push on the very center of this. I'm more interested in this very center part, um, sitting relatively flat, even though these lids are not perfectly flat. And now we have a flat surface, mating a flat surface, so a little snug up on that, and we're good. We don't want to be super aggressive on cranking that handle down, because you could very easily split one of them in half. Yes. Yep. Question is, am I going to use epoxy to glue it in? You bet. Scratch that lid up a bit. A little bit of 5-minute epoxy. Huh. It's kind of a different looking lid. It's kind of, I'm going to remove the middle part of it. It looks a bit, I think it'll look a little bit clunky. One thing, when we have it in this fashion, I'll be able to take that off, leave a little bit in there for a little button. You have to clean up that, get rid of the live center mark in the center first. That's gone. Because we know our bottom is probably down there in about that line where I sort of stopped sanding at, if it's even that deep. I won't jinx myself, but I can't say that I ever went through the top of one of these, but there's always that first for everything, so we'll bring this around the corner. Probably for my hands that might not be too bad, but somebody else's hands might not like that so well. I think we'll reduce the diameter here a little bit. Pretty much spent most of my week making dollhouse furniture. I think I'm pretty much finished with that, which is a challenge. If somebody ever asks you to make dollhouse furniture, it's it's fun. It's a challenge. Always like a challenge. It would make more sense to go here and there. That would work better. A little button. Still a hint of the live center there. I think before I clean any of that up, I left a ridge in the center. We'll have to deal with that a little bit, but the wonders of doing things the simple way, that we can actually put it on the jar, and then we can see what we're doing. No, it's way too thick. How about? So yeah, I was right. The bottom of the lid is right there. So I think we're going to reduce things by a bit. What's going on, Billy? I try not to make these things try and keep them so that they're not so sort of clunky. So I'll just drop that down a bit. I like that part. Oh man, never had it, but I feel for you on that. That's not a good scenario. Any of those things that involve your lungs. I don't get too close to the chuck. It's a pain in the ass to sign sand. We'll rest up a bit. Get on my cheater move. Got the shape right, but it's walnut, so it stood up the grain a bit. You're just a mess. You got all kind of them health issues. That little bit should have cleaned that up. It did. And that would be next weekend, right? Okay, so that will round off the rest of that with sandpaper. Easier than trying to cut it off there cleanly, but try and roll a teeny tiny little bead into a cove may not be the most efficient. Yeah, I managed to make it to SWAT once. I don't know that I'd love to go back down, but all these all these symposiums. It's just so hard on the pocketbook to go just for the weekend like that. When we did it several years ago, we went down and made a whole vacation thing out of it, where we went down to San Antonio and sort of traveled around a bit that week before SWAT, which of course adds to the considerably to the price tag of it. I will give them the people there at SWAT. I mean, they do a good job. It is a good symposium. There's no doubt about it. If I was going to spend the money to go to a big symposium, that would definitely be the one. But now, if we were to go back, be like, we've already done the river walk and all that stuff in San Antonio and all that. And it's like, now what do you do for, you know, what didn't you see the first time or whatever? But it's sort of a little bit further than in some ways than what I want to drag the camper, at least at this point in time. Although my wife has a trip planned. Let's go the other way. And we're going to go down to Florida for a couple weeks in October for the big 40th anniversary. And we are taking the camper there. But it's going to take us about 7 or 8 days to get there. No, that doesn't sound familiar. I'll put it that way. So I'm going to say no. Well, and the other part of the issue with going down there at that time of the year, I mean, this year might be different. At least around here it would be different because around here we're not getting no blazing hot heat right now. Actually, it's very nice. It's only in the upper 70s, low 80s for us right now. The part that killed me down there in Texas, and I think you've said about that before. You go into SWAT. It's a lovely convention center. I mean, there's nothing wrong with the venue or anything like that, except it's about 65 degrees inside there in the classrooms or in the whole symposium. And it's like, I'm all about being nice and cool, but it took new meaning to the word cool in there, as far as I was concerned. And everybody else complained about the same thing, but that it was actually cold in there. It's 95 degrees outside, but yet inside this venue is 60 something. It probably saved me money because instead of in between demonstrations, normally you'd run over to the vendor area and shop the wares and whatnot. And instead of doing that, I was running outside to get warmed back up. Yeah, well, you know what I'm talking about. I've heard you mention that down there about SWAT being cotton picking cold in there. And it was like everywhere we went down there was the same way. It wasn't just SWAT. You went into a lot of the restaurants and different places that we would be inside, and it's like it's hot outside, and it's like freezing cold inside. But it was fun. I mean, we had a good time. Yeah. How did I miss that? A little bit of picked up grain right down there. Here's where you get to sand your, try and bang your fingers off the chuck. Well, that's kind of a different reasoning, but if it makes sense to them, I guess it makes sense. But you would think in the restaurant business, you would sort of want people to stay and eat more or whatever. But I don't know, Bill. You're getting a little bit older now. You got to quit smoking so much of that wildwood weed. You know. I think that'll work. Now it's right now it's spinning reverse, spinning backwards. So that's why I'm able to stand on the top. It also makes it more challenging when I come down on the side. Maybe that's the problem. Maybe you should smoke some weed. Might help you. Nothing else would make you feel good. But your question, Todd, if I was spinning in the other direction, I would probably sand down here. But it still doesn't mean that I can't sand up here, basically going against the rotation. You just can't push very hard. If you watch Richard Raffin, he doesn't very seldom ever turn it in reverse, but he's always standing on top and he's coming you're coming into the rotation. But it's really not a bad thing because you shouldn't be putting 10 tons of pressure on there when you're sanding. Now, the wonder's this. I can move this out a little bit. And it really won't matter if it spins true or not, which it doesn't. Because all we're going to do is put our super glue on it. Get rid of some noise. And then the only little bit I'll have will be that inside rim after the fact. And we'll be done. Use that one. A piece of felt. A little bit of the old crusty 3408. Oh yeah. Yeah, I heard that knock too. Oh yeah. All right. All right. That's my wife banging on the door. Daughter's one dog has been on its last leg, and now we were in there earlier today, and she's not eating, and she's throwing up, and now a bunch of stuff come out. She has uh, something with her kidneys, I think it was. I guess they didn't expect her to actually make it for the. This went back several months, so according to my wife, it sounds like they're gonna take her for that one last trip to the vets. Of course, it's got to be on a Sunday, of course. This makes it more expensive. Little activator. And we'll call that almost done. So there we go. Down here, you can see what it looks like. What it will look like once that's all buffed up. Finish the hole into there, which gets done on the drill press. And in a little bit here, I'm going to do 1/4 of 7. I'll do the other. I have two. I actually have 3 lids ready, but I'll do the other lid since they're actually pretty quick. Do the cherry lid, and then we will do the dipper part. Dipper part's pretty quick and easy job. Good skew practice. That's the way I look at it. This one is not the. Hoping this one works out all right. It's got a kind of a knot in the middle of it. Should be all right, but should has a tendency not to work sometimes. So where are we at here? Oh, interesting. Almost looks like I got a little carried away. Yeah, just means we might have to remove a little bit more material than what was sort of anticipated, but it will work. Sort of a miniature bowl. I think that's what I did last week. I did the little bowls for this dollhouse. The sink, 2 sinks. Actually, I did like I get carried away with that stuff. It's just kind of like I don't know. I viewed it as being a bit entertaining, I guess. So I did a bunch of them. Did like 6 little bowls ranging from 3 inches on the biggest, down to about 2 3/4, even down to 2 1/2. And I had to well, I made the little legs last week for the table. But while I all the had the pin jaws on the small chuck, I started playing around with some other stuff. So they're all upstairs. I'll have to send a picture for the newsletter. And you'll probably see it because one of these pieces of cherry is more than long enough for what I need. Somebody gave me a bunch of pen blanks a while back, quite a while back actually. Somebody quit turning that used to be affiliated with our wood turning club, and he decided that he should give all this wood and stuff to the members of the club. And evidently the guy I didn't really even recognize the name, and I've been a member of that club for probably 20 years, but I'm not very good with names. But at any rate, he brought in these huge boxes of pen blanks, and the ones I brought home there was some Coco Bolo and another one that I have no idea what it is. It's just a shade. Or I'm a little crooked, I think. But at any rate, since I had the pin jaws on, that's a perfect size for the pin jaws to do little itty bitty mushrooms and really small trees. Okay. There's a prime example of my tool rest is not high enough. So when I went in about 1/4 inch, my tool's being pushed away because the bottom lip is dragging on the side. Good evening, Leonard. So I had to raise the tool rest up higher to accommodate that. The other accommodation, I do have another traditional scraper for a purpose other than, okay, we're high in the middle. Okay. Where the bottom section of that scraper is, this side over here is ground back. Actually, this is almost like a cutting edge. It's ground back far enough. This is sort of a cutting edge up here. Because when I do the lanterns, I used it. I made it for that sort of specifically, but it'll actually work very well for this too. Yeah, a little bit more of the brown. Once again, I won't be able to get tight into that corner for sure because it's thick, but a skew will work on its side. The only time you'll see me do such a thing with a skew is not a tool to be used on its side, but in this simple case for a little scraper, that's what we were looking for. Too deep, not much too deep. That would probably would work, but I have a lip out here that I didn't want anyhow, so I just take it away, clean it up, see if we got enough. don't jam it in there. Man, I think I was going to China on that sucker. Just in case you're wondering, just because I call it a square scraper, it's not square by any means. So I figured now we'll eventually get too much. Okay, tiny little recess out there. So this lid has some lid. One livable, I think. I don't go for that super suction fit. Gotta have some room in there for the glue, although I do have to clean up that corner. Left a little groover down there. More time. These lids are not exactly, don't exactly sit flat either. That'll work. Close enough. Drill the hole. This one, the last one I left sort of a little button on top of it, more of a decoration. This one's probably going to have a little button on top of it so that we don't have a hole coming through the top. Because this piece started out thinner to start with. And that hole's marked on that one, but let me get another lid. So I don't mark that hole for the lid. It becomes a bit of a challenge to mark it at a later stage, as in the one I did earlier this week. That very similar to what we're doing right now, but there's no hole. So whether I can possibly drill the hole in the metal lid and get close enough in there, maybe I'll be able to do that. Hopefully. Otherwise, I kind of wasted a bit of time making that one, but it is what it is. So let's use the point of the drill bit to stick it, and that's all we're doing. Because you can't. I've tried to drill them right here, and it's just there's not enough traction, and the little just bend. So it does not cooperate. It's probably the worst part of making these, I think, is that stinking little hole in there. So that's there. Let's see what that says. Make these for people with really good eyes that I don't have. So that's about 1/4 of an inch deep in that hole. Um, go inside of caution. As an eyeball kind of caution. Not close enough. I'm using about a half an inch to play with at the top. So yeah, there'll be a button up there. For sure. I thought of something the other day on this. I could actually put beads on the outside of these. It's too thick. Let's try one with beads. So we'll shrink the diameter down a bit. Be a really exciting time to have a little bit of a miscalculation in there and have a little bit of a catch and have it jam back into the truck. But as long as you're careful. I think I could get a little bit more. Some of that top's going to go away, so I can go off the end without any issues. Doesn't look like it's the most parallel cut I've ever made in my life. So we'll watch the top horizon this time, and then we'll get a straight line. That will work. I always like when I can come up with something new and different to do with the beading tools. A little quick hone on the diamond hone. This is one of the few tools that I do hone quite a bit. I will hone this for quite a while before I go back to the grinder and touch it up. So, father over. It's kind of a down. I don't know if I'd call it a downfall, but certain tool rests do not work very well with these because it wants to be. Let's go strictly overhead. Let's see if I can bring you in nice and close. The tool wants to be down at a pretty good angle. So if I do it over here in the middle of the tool rest, it has a tendency to hit the back. So you almost have to work off the end of the tool rest. At least that's how I was showed to use them, and that's how I've always kind of used them. This one wants to come just off the edge. So I'll mark it. That way I can stick the right point in. Mark the next one. The next one. Don't move the tool rest when it's running. Everybody knows that, and everybody breaks that rule. And we're going to go for 4. It'll give me a little dome shape on the top. Really, almost the easiest thing to do with these is put a tiny little light pencil line in the center of it. That way you'll know when you're at a complete bead. There's no guessing involved in it. It's just a matter of wiggling it back and forth. I think I might have to hone a little bit more because it doesn't feel like the one side sharp. No, it is not. Well, let's go to the grinder. No idea what the angle is on these though. So we're going to be guessing. Huh, that's pretty close to me. Kind of a neat little tool. When I bought them many, many years ago, they were expensive then. At 40, let's say $44, $45 a pop. If you bought the complete set or bought, I want to say it was 5 of them, then they knocked a couple dollars off of them, which is what I did with them. But oh yeah, sorry. Should learn to take my face. I gotta move. I gotta figure out a different place to put that camera. My head's always in the road. My apologies. Oh yeah, night and day. This takes very little light pressure. Come on, get out of there. Thank you. I do not even have a handle on the tool. Never really found much of a need for the handle. Handle will have you being a little bit more aggressive with it. That'll save you a lot of aggravation. Nothing finer than making a whole bunch of beads with this tool, with one of these tools, to figure out that you still have a flat spot in the middle. Last thing I do with them, I'm down at an angle. When I get to that line, then I raise the handle a little bit, and it becomes sort of a. I mean, they're really just a scraper all the way around. I've only ever found a couple woods that did not cooperate very well with it. Cherry is not one of them. Cherry does really well, although there's a tiny bit of picked up grain there. Because you really don't want to sand them. But I sort of have to chuckle. I saw a guy doing a demonstration using one of them in a symposium years ago. And he didn't mark them. He did one, he did a complete bead, and then tries to go over and make this nice, crisp, clean line in between them. And he really wasn't, he was kind of, I think he said it was his first time doing a demonstration like that. And it was like, he was very nervous to start with. And I'm like, I did walk up to him after the fact. I'm like, did you ever watch anybody from the people from D-Way, which is who makes them? I'm like, you know, if you mark them all, that process you just did there becomes very, very simple. Like, otherwise, you can't find that crisp line in between them. So we'll go through our sanding on the bottom. I will touch the beads when I get to probably 400, and it will be a very small kind of a touch. Very bottom when I sort of make sure it's nice and round, but because other than that one with a little bit of disturbed grain on it, all the other ones are cut very, very smooth and clean. I will use the cut edge of the sandpaper down in that groove and just sort of roll it over the top a little bit. And like I say, it takes very little. And then go back the other way. And if you see the people that are got more on there than what I thought, I'll go back a grit. Let's go in reverse and make it easier. You see the people with basket of illusions and things like that, where they're really spending a ton of time coloring all these little segment type things on the beads. That's the tool that most people's using. One just doesn't want to cooperate. One other simple way of skinning that cat, since it did not want to cooperate, we will just recut it a tiny little bit. Like I say, they will not continue to go deeper, but if I take a tiny bit off of the center parting tool, make a tiny little flat, put the speed a bit higher than what it was, and I go back in and I'll form that bead again, and we'll see whether I got that one. Some of it, not all of it. Do these two, because these two end ones, for some reason, did the same thing both times. Just wiggle a little bit further around that corner, and it will sort of make that groove a little bit deeper. It helped it, but did not eliminate it. It did on the one. Kind of the biggest thing for me to remember to do when I'm in there wiggling back and forth, when I'm done wiggling back and forth and everything else, is to back out nice and straight. Because if you do any little movement coming back out, it will really mess them up. I think that's going to live. There's still a little bit on that one, but see if I can get a little bit of. Better. Once that I stiffen that up with the super glue, I'm going to remove a bunch of this down to that bead so it'll become more exposed. So once the super glue is on there and set up and hard, I'll be able to go back with some like 600 or 800 grit sandpaper and smooth that last little bit out. At least that's the plan. And of course, as wood turns, we're more critical about that stuff than what the person would be that would be interested in purchasing such a thing. Last, wrong way. Just snug. Crack is not our friend there, certainly. So the bottom of our drill hole is about where this top bead would be. So we know from there that we can't go any further, any deeper. This is cherry. It won't make me sneeze, so we'll turn the dust noisy off. I do not have a hole there, that's a plus. Okay, we can just sort of curve that. The bow gouge, doing the spindle gouge, much safer, pointier. I'm trying to get in up against the side of that bead, like that, without jamming into it, preferably. And I guess you can see it right there. I think I need to move the camera, but I don't. You might see what we're doing. Might be actually a better view to see what we're doing. Okay. I think we'll leave a little bit bigger diameter button this time. Let's see if we can get this right in one shot. Preferably without destroying that. Doesn't want to go underneath it. Little bite. That'll work. That's what we can do with this scraper. And we'll just leave a little, just a little bump, I should say, more so than anything. That was sort of a pulling cut with the spindle gouge, which will not leave a smooth surface at all. Which I knew that, but you can get our trusty friend the scraper. And sort of the shear scraping mode, very fine shavings. It's a very useful cut to do with them. Still a little bit left. Or one more time. The other one that I could use would be the spear point one. Will allow me to get in closer to that little button. We might have to use it. Shouldn't have to though. As my button continues to shrink, but it's okay. It's just a little decorative. It's just something on the top to make it look like you cared enough to do something. Certainly not getting wants to pick up a little bit of grain right in there beside that stupid button. Patience preserves it. Now there's a little bit more left on here. Is it sandable? Absolutely would be. I don't like to sand any more than I have to. But as you see, I'm using that shear scraper, which is just nothing more than a curved scraper. But once it's up here side, I want to drop the tool rest down. I want to still be cutting at the center line. Think of it as a skew. We can only use the bottom half of it. If we were engaged the top half, then it would act just like a skew and would slam it back down. And then there's all kind of excitement that goes with that. And it's, to be quite honest with you, it's not the greatest excitement you want to have in your day. Because the traditional scraper will enlighten you when you use it wrong. And it's not something you want to do because it's not friendly at all. A little bit of 180. I possibly could have started with 220, but there's a couple little ripples in there that will go away much quicker with the 180. And then we'll just proceed on. Trying not to hit the side of the bead like I was, but I'll have to dress it up just a little bit on the higher grits in there. What you don't see is I'm trimming the end of the, a lot of times I'm using this end down here, which will wear out, clog up, and all that good stuff. So I just cut it off with the scissors, and my piece of sandpaper just kind of continues to shrink until I've pretty much used up the whole piece. Make sure I have everything nice and clean. When I sand by hand, I do go to 600. If you wanted to, you could even go to 800. Not necessarily find that's quite necessary, but 600 seems to be a really good place to stop. Scratches at that rate are very, very small from sanding, and they sort of disappear. If they don't, which in this case it doesn't really seem to have wanted to totally disappear, you can still see some lines. We take a piece of 800, just kind of use a little bit of a corner on it, do little random orbit circles, and go the whole way around this piece. It almost contradicts what you've just done, but when you go to 800, your eye cannot pick up 800 grit scratches unless they would be in a straight line. Then you could see them. This way, it just broke all these radial lines that's going straight around. It breaks them up, and now you can't see them. And you'll get them. You'll be much happier with your finish, no matter what you're using. Unless you use a flat doll finish or something like that, then it wouldn't matter much. That's the bead that was in question. So I shouldn't turn the dust collector off. It will suck a little bit of dust. That definitely is not a good place for there to be some disturbed grain. Now I can actually get to it. Little tiny bits on the top. You can actually hear it, and you won't be able to hear it. The mic won't pick that up so much, but you can feel it in your fingers when you're sanding something like that. It's sort of, when it comes to that place, it sort of can feel it like tug on your fingers rather than it just sliding across that surface, which is kind of neat in a way. And now it's going pretty much. Nothing says that there's still a little bit there. At 400, we could sand a little bit across it. It's a little, has a tiny little flat spot there. The only person who would know that be you sitting here watching me do it. Otherwise, you'll never feel it or see it. Exactly. We can just be extra cautious. Go from 400 to 800. And we'll just stand over that little area a little bit. Just because you feel like being Mr. Fussy. Look at that. Two lids done. I will go the right way. Bring it out a little ways. Probably as far out as I can. Tiny little bit of pressure. There's a place you really don't want to try and be aggressive. And crank down on that. You'll have a lid that's in two pieces very quickly. You got a glove. I'll be paying attention to the Harbor Freight advertisements. You gotta soon have these Nurgle gloves on sale again. My fly's getting a little low in the box. So I put a little piece of polyester felt in there. Acts as a reservoir for the glue. Makes it a little less messy. Not that it's super messy to start with, but just gives it a better place to sit. Do the big flat area first. Do the top of the beads while we're here. And now you have the problem of what to do with the inside of the bead. Guess what? Gravity will take over, and it would literally run the whole way, or at least part way down around, and take care of that problem for us quickly, usually, as it drips off the bottom. Get as much of the bottom one as I can. Get it around to where it's semi-flat. Just make it easier when I go to put a little bit of finish on that bottom part. Because whenever I do that bottom part, the 3408 will not allow you to put multiple coats on. So if I slop some over the edge, it will dry almost instantly when it's on top of itself. not quite as instant as what the instant super glues do, but it'll dry quicker than what you can get it wiped off usually. So now we're left with that little bit in the center on them beads. We can be really try and be fussy and try and get a fingernail down in there on our paper towel. Or we can just not be that fussy and not worry about it. You get the majority of it out. The rest will sit there, and it may not necessarily be as flat and nice as what it would be on surface that we were able to dry. But once again, you really won't be able to tell the difference. Maybe even taking a little screwdriver in the paper towel. What's happened to me when I do something like that to try and get that last little bit, because I can see it's extra shiny down there, so that means there's some laying down in there. But then you run the risk of the screwdriver putting a big hairy scratch in there, so it's not worth the aggravation of messing something up that's pretty much finished. A couple shots of activator at a nice distance. Don't spray activator up close and personal like you see a lot of people do. Doesn't go as well. Also, let's go over where we at. We're at overhead. Give you an idea on how penetrating that super glue is. That would be end grain from the other side. This is about 1/4 of an inch thick, but where the beads are, it's less than that. So it actually came the whole way through to the inside on both sides where it's end grain. Even a little bit down in that area for some reason, but that gives you an idea where it goes to. Soaks in very quickly and very deeply. So I'll set that off to dry. You do have to keep that in mind too. If you do certain things that are thin enough, it won't necessarily stick to the chuck dolls overly quickly. If I was so minded and would have been a little bit concerned about such a thing as that, a little bit of like some sort of a wax, a little bit on that on the chuck, on the jaws or something like that. Super glue and waxes do not get along, so it wouldn't stick to it. It won't stick to it. I know, too much information, but I try and keep people informed of what not to do with the super glues. So now we'll make the honey dipper part. So once again, these are actually very short. I'm going to grab them in the pin jaws. It would be beneficial to widen things out so I don't make you dizzy while I'm doing this. So I will mark a center on the one end. Do I have to? Probably not. This makes it look better for somebody that maybe a little bit newer at some of this stuff. How much am I going to need? That's the next scenario. Runs on my mind. I'll take my trusty little jar. These jars have a hump in the middle. So we're just over 3 inches to that hump. And we don't want to make it, it doesn't want to touch that hump. So if we call it 3, we need another call it 3/8 of an inch thereabouts. So about 3 3/8 to 3.5. So we go 3.5. That's more than enough down there. Part of that will be a tenant to go up into that. I always used to do these just strictly between center. I thought the other day after playing around with the little squares in this chuck and jaws. Whoops, let's hope you put the center in now. So switch to a teeny tiny little center, which is the one that Cindy Drozda makes and sells. I think she still does that. Goes in one-way style live center. The wonders of it is this thing is 3/8 of an inch deep. And actually, I'll probably put the tenant down there. So when I did in between centers, that was my kind of my mark to where I needed to go to. We're going to try it ass backwards today. Yeah. So if I do it ass backwards, this will allow me to do everything on the bottom of it and be able to clean off the bottom completely. Versus if I do it the other way around, I'll be left with a little nub down there or whatever that I have to sand off, which is not overly big deal, but not an overly square piece of wood. But does it matter? No. We're going to make it round. I make a V cut back there with the skew. And I use a long point down and I'll round this off back here. With that V cut, it means it doesn't splinter things up when I get down into that area, which is kind of helpful. Less distracting. Round. Still not. Jeez. Piece was a lot farther out of round than what it looked. Doesn't need to be very big. Just a little jar, so I would rather be a little bit on the delicate side on that note. Now it's round. So I put a poke mark in there. Poke mark's not very deep on this case, so go about 1/8 of an inch. Peel and cut right down to it. So we said we're going to want about 3 inches. And then somewhere there, about there, in that area is going to be our tenant. So let's go about 1 inch. Let's go a little more. more like about 1.25 inches. Never claimed to be a master at proportions. So V cut, get rid of that line. We don't need that anymore. We're gonna guess, just because I like to guess. We're gonna call that our center point, our center line, so to speak. A little bead, elongated bead. Sort of feels like I should have sharpened this into that corner. My gentle final pass, hopefully. The wonders of the skew is the diameter keeps shrinking. You got to keep moving that tool rest down. Once again, we don't want that. We don't want to be headed downhill. Here I will use the long point to finish that bead off, or at least some of it. Hopefully we don't show you what a real patch looks like, but there we go. So now once we get it, yeah, oblong shape, it's bigger. My eye says right now it's actually bigger here than it is here. I have a much longer taper there. Does that matter? Probably not. But I have that line there, so I'm going to get rid of that. Okay. Simplest one. Go back to about our center point and do V cut. Go over an 1/8, another 1/8, another V cut both sides. They don't need to be super deep. At least that's my opinion of them. Just sort of give a place for the honey to stick in there somewhat. Deep. One more top. Okay. If you're really fancy, you could round them over, but I usually don't necessarily bother with it. Seems like a bit of work that's a bit of a waste. What we could do, though, dress them up a little bit. We could just burn them lines. Let me turn it down. Like the ones that don't have a cloud of smoke in front of everything. Gives it a little visual interest, what I call that. So we know this is where it wants to end. So we know that. Just sort of give it a little bit of a taper, maybe a little bit of a curve taper. There's this view, it doesn't want to take big bites. It's not the world's greatest taper for sure. Drop this down a bit back here for one, just to get it out of the road so I can get the Holy back here. I think it still looks a little, this looks a little heavy to me. It kind of work. Looks better. Here's where you can totally screw it up because this last little bead here really wants to go around that corner into there. Success is always a plus. This wants to be cut flat or even slightly undercut right there would be better. For me, it's a little bit on the wrong end. For me to do that, I sort of have trouble seeing in a way to see what I'm doing, and I'm not the definitely not a left-handed skew user. I should work at it, but I don't. But I'm gonna have to go to a parting tool anyhow to make our tenant. Just think in a second. I think before I do that, I'm gonna finish cutting off that end. So we'll lose our support. Very, very small little itty bitty bites. But this flexing, I don't know whether you can see it. I can hear it more than anything. I'll make that nice and sort of a nice round bottom. Probably would be about the best time right now to actually give all this a little brief sanding. One thing about using a skew is sanding is kind of like secondary when you do it correctly, at least mostly correctly. Here's where you get to start sanding at 220 or even possibly 320. Just want to sand out any of the little ripples that may be there, as well as knock these razor blade edges off a little bit. because they are sharp. Well, 220, 320, and that's going to be it. It is a honey dipper, so we're going to use honey. So what goes with honey, but a little bit of beeswax. I probably could finish them with the 3408, but I usually don't. A little bit of my softer beeswax. It has mineral oil and carnauba in it. You know when you get it all cleaned off, because it will be very shiny. It'll actually be pretty shiny when you're done. Hardest part is to get should have women's fingernails for this. Get your fingernail in them little grooves. Not that it really would hurt anything. It is just beeswax, but it shows up as white. This last one just doesn't want to cooperate. Single ply. There we go. Now I got it out of there. Should have got off the surface. Parting tool to make the tenon. I can move, set these calipers for the hole, hopefully. Could use the drill bit as well. Should be close enough. I have a little bit of room in there for glue anyhow. And that will be, yeah, that'll be 5-minute epoxy in there as well. Because I have it mixed up to do the lid. I do it all in one shot. Glue the lid in as well as glue this in all at one time. But I do want this little rim to have a slight bit of an undercut. Always makes things fit a little better if you do. That's a snug fit. It left the burnish line in there, but looks to be even. See what it is. Yep. Close enough for government work. And we'll grab our parting tool that has a bit of an angle on it because I left a ridge in there that I do not want at the very bottom of it. So while we're at it, leave two, maybe three little grooves in there. Gives the glue somewhere to go into, and sort of help it to key together. So how deep is our hole? Some ways that we're doing it this way. This one, the next one. If I do the next one, so we're just about the end of that little V groove there. So that's just as good a place as any to at least start to cut it off. Got a little chamfer on the end. And then of course the moment of truth. I don't have the hole drilled in the lid, but so that's what it'll look like in there. Could have been a little tighter for sure, but that'll work. Hopefully I could. I know I can. No, I still can. I could maybe try. Put a little bit of paper towel in there just to make it tight. Tight enough to, there we go, that should stay. Tight enough to put it on the jar. I can't put it on the lid, or on the, yeah, I can't put the lid on it. So I can make sure that I have a solid eighth of an inch at the bottom. So that's what they'll end up looking like. Finish the last little bit on the bottom of that. Tomorrow or another day we'll buff the lids and then I put them together. And they're ready to go. So you turn a, for me, this is a $15 item. So that's in my booth, so to speak. So you turn what is normally a $3 jar at Hobby Lobby into something that's worth $15. So it's not too bad. They don't, like I say, you don't take a ton of time to make, but they do sell. So that kind of makes the fun part of it in some ways. So last thing we're going to do for this project, we have about another, I don't know, a little over an inch or so, inch and a half maybe. Bring it out to the end of the jaws. It would be better if I actually got it centered a little bit better than that. Here's where it becomes a challenge to actually get them centered. But does it really matter? The answer for that would be no. And tap on them a little bit, get them centered. These long picture jaws like that, when you clamp down on them real tight, they don't flex very much, but they will flex a little bit. So now you have a teeny tiny little spindle type project. I'll show you what you do with little pieces. This is one of them. I kind of fell across this the other day when playing around with this dollhouse. I'll blame it on the dollhouse. So now here's another little pieces of little bits of wood. To save, because they do pen classes at the woodcraft store. So I would save all these little pieces of wood for them to use them for their pen classes. I probably still will, but somewhat. But here's another thing, sort of, so to speak, to do with them. Little 3/4 inch square, something like that. Maybe a little more than 3/4. This one started out its life. Put the skew away because that's not really. I guess if you were one of them guys across the pond, this would be a skew job, but for me, it's not. Little 3/8 spindle gouge. Give the top a dome shape. This is very small, so let's get in here up close and personal so you can really get a good bird's eye view. So round the top over. Practice on nice clean cuts, nice smooth curve. Round to the end, cut the end free, or cut off the end. Back a little ways. And cut into the middle, towards the middle. Little round over. We're going to say we're going to cut it off probably there. Any idea? Anybody have any idea what I'm going to make? It'll be evident here in a second. Too big of a round ball. Come on. Left-handed is not cooperating. But we don't give up. Come on. Coming around too far. Come on. Do it right-handed. A little undercut. Just made this too big. Looks too long. Great practice, I think. So this is going to be cut off. Think about there. I normally don't sand mushrooms. Slow the speed down a bit to sand. It's these little guys, at least the ones I did the other day. I gave them a quick little sand. Just because they're so small and easy to sand, probably. More the reasoning. So a little 320, 400. Now we have a teeny tiny little mushroom. Gonna do my undercut with the parting tool a little bit first. Should have did that before I sanded it, because that'll leave a little sharp edge out there. And you have sort of a measure. It's probably about 1 inch long, would be my guess. Mushroom, glove, as usual, super glue, slow as the lathe will go. I have not put any of these in any of our stores that we're in yet. But my wife thought they were just cuter than a button. I took some up to her the other night, and she's like, "Oh my, they're so cute!" And she showed them to some of her girls that she was on Zoom with, and they're like, "Oh, I like them." And I'm saying, "You ain't gonna pay the shipping price to ship them to your house, but as long as you like them, that's good." Dry off the excess. Kick it off. I actually kick them off pretty hard, usually. Lose the glove. Generally, while we're doing that, it gets time to set up. I don't necessarily recommend to do it this way, but for these little guys, it worked very well for me the other day. A little bit of abrasive paste a fine abrasive paste. While it's running nice and slow, get a little bit of paper towel, rub some of that on. Which, if you ever read the directions, that's what you're supposed to do at a very slow speed or even stopped. You know us men, we don't necessarily read directions very well. Bring the speed up. I'm up about 1,000, something like that. Let it do its abrading, abrading, I guess you'd consider it. You can see it's starting to get a pretty good shine even at that. I guess when it sounds, to me, this stuff here, the easiest way to describe it is something this small. It really doesn't make a whole lot of noise, but something bigger, it will sort of sound like it's scratching the snot out of it, which it is. So from there, I'm up a little over 1900 to finish the polishing. And there you have it. The teeny tiny little mushroom. Make him in all kind of different woods. All the domestic woods. And like I said, some, I'll have to show you the piece of wood that I did some of them with. I really need to find one of them pen people that can actually tell me what the wood is. I know it's an exotic wood, but it really made it a neat little mushroom, as well as I did little trees that were only about 1.5 or 2 inches tall. Same way, just a little itty bitty piece of wood. Generally leaves a little nub in the bottom. So I do a little bit of wood carving myself, so I'm very comfortable doing that, even with the gouge or spindle gouge or whatever. There you have it, a little mushroom. Make sure I get it in the right place. So it is That one's pushing 1.25 inches high, but I think they're fun. I don't know. They just kind of tripped my trigger on doing them. I like doing mushrooms anyhow. And for whatever reason, people seem to like them. Make them all different sizes, shapes. Ideally would be to have some bark on them. If you get a tree branch, you can keep the bark on. It's always a neat feature to have a bark rim around them, maybe even a little bark around the base of them or something. But just another project to make you want to keep more little bits and pieces of wood. Um, Exotic ones that I got from that episode look like that. A little too close probably to see them. So this back one, the one that I'm touching, I'm pretty sure that is cocoa bolt. This one here, I have no clue. I'll be at Woodcraft this week teaching classes. I'll have to go out there on the shelf and see what it might be. It's very pretty when it's finished up. And it actually turned very nice. There's some stuff that's called a palm. I don't remember what, black palm or something like that. Somebody gave me a piece of that, and it was horrible to turn. It just tripped and carried on, where this reddish stuff did not. So it made some really cute little mushrooms of that, about the same size. So you figure, I don't know what pen blank. I never buy any pen blanks. So they're only about 5 inches long, something like that. So yeah, this one I'm pretty sure is Bacote. I think this is the one that's in real question. It's red and has like dark brownish dark. It really simpler way of showing you what it looks like when you put something on it. No, that's not overly great indication, but it turns to a red and turns to a darker red. Wipe off the excess there, and it leaves these really darker streaks are very pronounced when you turn it into something like a tree or a mushroom or whatever. It's quite interesting looking. I don't know that I'd necessarily want to buy any of them, but you know, free is always good, and it was free to me, so I kind of liked it. And the guy that brought this stuff to the turning club or gave it to us, I mean, there was just, I guess he was a pen turner, or at least that's where he ended his career or whatever. And there was just like 18-inch, 20-inch square boxes just full of pen blanks like that. Yeah, I have no idea. Hey, thanks for stopping by, Al. We're done. Anyhow, be good. Won't be there Wednesday night to bug you, so yep. Everybody have a wonderful rest of your evening, as we are going to call today an evening, and we will be back next Sunday. So until then, everybody have a wonderful week and stay safe in your shops. I work more in this YouTube thing. Still not cooperating the way I wanted to. So, till next week, everybody have fun.